So it's a recipe for a very good business that allows an asset that's increasing in value, scarce in supply, and that's continuously increasing in demand because more and more people are getting richer historically every single year for the last 20 years.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast, coming to you from Montecito, California. Before we begin, just a reminder, there's a website associated with this podcast. It's wealthformula.com. One of the things to really consider doing there as soon as possible in this fourth quarter is to join the Accredited Investor Club, the AKA Investor Club. You can do that at wealthformula.com. There's a lot of things going on in there right now in terms of private deal flow, particularly focused on tax mitigation and alternatives and real estate and stuff like that. So make sure you check it out, especially if you're looking at, potentially doing something that you invest in and saves you some tax dollars as well. Go to wealthformula.com. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that I've talked about before. A few years back, I'm going to just give you this example. I bought some very expensive sports coats and I wore them. At first I wore them a lot, but over time they kind of lost their luster. I found often to be the case in my life. If I don't tend to care that much about fancy stuff, even though I kind of feel like I want to, fancy jackets, fancy shoes, I tend to regress to my 1992, circa 1992 style, which is like, jeans and maybe a flannel or t-shirt or whatever. But point is, it's not expensive. So realizing that these fancy clothes were just rotting in my closet, I recently thought, well, gosh, maybe I can make some money off these and sell them. So I sold them on a well-known secondhand site with that only has designer stuff on it. And I ended up only getting about 10 cents on the dollar for what I paid. Now, these things were in like perfect condition and all that, and that was super designer stuff, whatever. But I was shocked, right? But maybe I shouldn't have been, and probably I shouldn't have been, because buying new fancy clothes has an extremely low likelihood of being a good investment. It reminded me, though, of my good friend that I've talked about before here in town, who's made millions of dollars in his life. Right? He has a lot of money. But the thing is that, throughout this journey, he's only really ever bought nice stuff. I mean, and the other thing is he almost never buys new things. So, for example, furniture in his house, incredible. He's a design guy. He's got hundreds of thousands of, probably even millions of dollars worth of mid-century modern gems in his home. And he buys vintage cars rather than new supercars to, get that sort of thrill of having the fancy cars. And he also has a 7-figure collection of rare watches. He's got a bunch of these. I don't even know anything about these watches, but he knows everything about them, and he's got a lot of it. He's got a lot of money invested in that stuff. I know what's the difference between what he's doing and what I did with those clothes. Well, he was actually investing while I was spending. He's bought millions of dollars of cars and watches, but he's always made money with them because he's focused on their future value as well. So anyway, maybe I'm a little bit dense, but I never thought about stuff this way before meeting him. And I still have to remind myself of the paradigm, that sort of paradigm. It's just a different way to look at luxury, and one that is certainly smarter when it comes to, your pocketbook. Anyway, that brings me to today's guest on Wealth Formula Podcast. And he basically teaches people how to live the lifestyle, in particular with cars and watches. But again, do kind of what my friend's doing, which is you're not actually going to lose money on this. You're going to make money, or at least break even or whatever. And you're going to be able to have a bunch of really nice stuff. I've had him on the show before. And I've gotten requests since then to have him on again with people who've actually taken his program. So I think you'll find it interesting, and we'll have that interview right after these messages.
Wealth Formula Banking is an ingenious concept powered by whole life insurance. But instead of acting just as a safety net, the strategy supercharges your investments. First, you create a personal financial reservoir that grows at a compounding interest rate, much higher than any bank savings account. As your money accumulates, you borrow from your own bank to invest in other cash flowing investments. Here's the key: even though you've borrowed money at a simple interest rate, your insurance company keeps paying you compound interest on that money, even though you've borrowed it. As a result, you make money in two places at the same time. That's why your investments get supercharged. This isn't a new technique. It's a refined strategy used by some of the wealthiest families in history, and it uses century-old, rock-solid insurance companies as its backbone. Turbocharge your investments. Visit wealthformulabanking.com. Again, that's wealthformulabanking.com.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, I am joined by PJ Gadimi. He's an entrepreneur and investor who's built a career around challenging the way we think about wealth, really. He's a creator of what he calls the wealth transfer methodology, using luxury assets like exotic cars and watches, not just for lifestyle, but as investments. He's helped thousands of people think differently about alternative assets and the way that you can potentially invest in this thing. And I was just telling PJ offline here that he is constantly being recommended by people in our audience. So wanted to get him back on the show. PJ, thanks for coming back on, man.
Yeah, it's been a while. Good to be talking again.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's kind of do big picture here. I mean, you talk about wealth transfer instead of wealth creation. Break that down. What does that mean? Like, what's your kind of big philosophy that you're after here?
So we've been trained as human beings to think of luxuries as depreciating liabilities. So as expenditures, right? Our whole lives we've been told, you don't spend money on these things. They're useless, and they're going to depreciate and be worth zero, or they're going to be high maintenance cost type things. And why would you do that? You could invest in real estate instead, and blah, blah, blah. So, there's been this culture for the last 20 years that has prevented people from basically having greater experiences with these things like cars or watches or even real estate. In many cases, we're told to buy what we need in homes, not extravagant, insane homes, etc. But yet, over the last, I've been teaching this for about 20 years, but it was very in its infancy stages back then. But, over the last 10 years, we've seen a significant shift in how consumers spend, what they spend on. And all of these industries, cars, watches, real estate, have favored financially the extravagance. Like the world's best bags, like Hermes handbags, bring back 200% ROI versus Coach bags bring back 10 cents on the dollar. So you have you have significant supporting data to what I'm talking about over the last decade. And I think it's only going to get worse going forward for the next 20, 30 years. So I think there's just a new way of thinking about these expenditures, or so they call them, and instead looking at them as transfers of assets. And here's what I mean by that. We are trained to think when we buy a $200K car that we are buying a $200,000 item. And therefore, we're really scrambling around, do I really need a $200,000 item? But reality is, because there has been so much demand and such little supply and such a significant speed and increase of millionaires across the globe, that, or just individuals making more money than they were previously, more ways of making money, that there has been a shift in the fact that 200K expenditure in the past now could be a transfer of wealth where it won't depreciate over the next 12 to 24 months. So you could actually buy it, park your money in it, enjoy it, and then get your money back out because there's enough liquidity in that industry, giving you the ability to just enjoy a car without actually losing money. Now, contrary to buying that base BMW or that Kia or something that you've been told is economically affordable, yet depreciating to zero. And even though that's a 30K car depreciating to zero, that's still a 30K loss. But if you have 200K, or even if you borrow it, you're easily able to drive that car and get your 200K back. So it creates a very different dynamic in situation, from one side to the other.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting. I learned a little bit about this kind of thing just its lifestyle, I would call it. It's a different way of seeing, things that you buy from a really high net worth, ultra high net worth friend of mine who, he buys, he's builds homes and designs the homes rather. And, he's never going to buy something that isn't going to go up in value. So his furniture is completely stocked in his house with like really rare pieces, like incredible pieces that are worth something. And
Exactly.
again, right. And his thought is, well, listen, people think I'm spending a lot, but in reality here, I'm spending less than the people who are buying brand new stuff from the store that is guaranteed to be worth less. So it is a fascinating thing. I've seen it in real life. PJ, in terms of cars, because I know that's a major thing that you talk about. Like that's an area where I've seen my friend do that again, but mostly with vintage cars, right? Like he had a Ferrari Dino for a while, and he drove it around, and then he sold it for like $200,000 more a few years later. When you look at cars, for example, can you talk about some of the specific factors that help you decide whether something is going to appreciate versus depreciate? Because obviously, new cars, for the most part, often, even if you're buying um, a Ferrari or something like that, for the first few years at least, it's going to see a dip. So what's sort of in
So
general?
yes and no, but let's address
Yeah,
your friend with a
yeah,
Ferrari Dino, which is
yeah.
something that is a misconception, is that the only cars that do provide good asset class management are cars that are older, obviously collectible. But have you tried driving an old piece of shit like that? Like you don't want to be in it.
It's like a
Like
go kart. It's like
yeah,
a
I mean,
go
you don't
kart.
even want to be in it because it's uncomfortable. The AC doesn't work half
Yeah,
the time. And
yeah.
sometimes you can't even find parts if things go bad. So, the average person cannot execute on a strategy of buying an old classic Ferrari that's in the shop every 3 days and ultimately doesn't know what to do and is constantly pissing away money. Modern supercars, and this isn't every car, what you said has some accuracy to it that yes, there are a lot of cars in their first year or two that show some sign of depreciation. That depreciation, once it settles, holds the car there for the duration or the rest of its lifetime. So to give you an example, a Lamborghini Huracan, when it first came out in like 2015, was a 230 to 250K car and brand new. Now he depreciated to around the 200 to 210K range. And ever since 2017 has been at the same price. So if you would have bought a Lamborghini Huracan in 2017, 18, 19, 20 during the pandemic era or anything else after, that doesn't even matter how much up cars went, came down, that car would still be 210. So the point is that if you bought it at like 200, then you would have made 10K. If you bought it at 210, you would have lost nothing. But let's imagine you would have even lost 10 grand over 4 years driving a Lamborghini. Does anybody really care to lose $200 a month for driving a, $250,000 car, right? So yes, cars depreciate, but there is a reality that's coming that's very effective right now that people are not talking about. And it's that the same way that your friend's Dino went up in value, current exotic cars are starting to rise with a lot of value, even when they're not special, for two key reasons. The first one is the industry as a whole has a lot of confusion about electric cars. And a lot of manufacturers have introduced electric cars that people don't want. So there is a significant demand increase for used exotics over new exotics because new product isn't exciting for almost all manufacturers. Lamborghini, McLaren, Ferrari. It doesn't mean that some product is not exciting, but the majority of the product is not. Two, the price index of how much inflation, tariffs, and things have impacted cost bases of these cars has created a significant demand for used cars again because of where the price landed versus new cars. To give you an example, in 2015, the Huracan brand new was a $250,000 car, and this was a very expensive car at the time for people. Today, like the replacement to that car called the Temerario, which is ultimately the same car just with a hybrid component, like the new version of that car, the base price with some options is around 400. So the entry Lamborghini went from originally in 2004 when it first came out in the hundreds now to 400 for the very same car. So you're talking about 20 years later, the same entry product now costs someone like 2.5 times as much as it did versus back in 2004 when that product was even introduced. And historically, cars are never less expensive than their predecessors. So they're always more expensive, which means that this is one of the reasons depreciation cycles and exotic cars stabilize a lot more than Hondas or Acuras or things like that, because they don't zero out and there's always demand at different levels that make it make sense. And so people are interested, like even today, let's say someone in your audience is gaining some money, having some success, and they want to buy a car. They may be outpriced out of a 400K classic car, but they can still play at 200. Now, if enough of them come in, well, there's only limited units of these 200K cars. The price goes up because everybody wants a 200K car instead of a 400K car. So these cycles in finance have stabilized these prices so much and have now caused a reversal where prices are increasing on very common goods that you would call a Lamborghini Huracan a very common car, but yet with more miles and more usage, yet its price index has not changed, which tells you that if you now are buying a car with 20,000 miles versus 4 years ago with 8,000 miles, you're paying the same price today as you were back then.
Is it typically cars that you can do this with? Is it typically going to be cars that are like 200 grand, or could somebody do this with at a $50,000 number?
Yeah.
What's an example of that? Yeah.
Well, let me give you a very simple example. Take a look at BMWs, for example. Thousands of units made of regular BMWs, whatever that they're 3 Series, 2 Series, whatever. Look at these specialty BMWs, for example, like the X5M, the X6M, or any of the like M8, for example, rather than the 8 Series, the Race Performance Series. These cars start in very high MSRPs, like insane, like 150, 200 grand. But they quickly, within 2.5 years, depreciate 50 cents on the dollar. Once they hit that, the depreciation cycle slows down to less than like 3 to 5% a year, which means that you have the ability after year 3 to drive these cars for 2 to 3 years at minimal losses, similar to that of a Honda or Volkswagen Passat or Honda Accord in its essence. Because what you get is, while you will lose the same maybe as the depreciation yearly, because obviously you're dealing with a 150K car versus a Honda Accord being a 40K car. The difference here is that you're driving a 150K car and it's costing you like $500 a month, which is significantly better than leasing a new Honda Accord and not really getting any enjoyment out of the experience.
Right. So you could scale it down. You may not make money or you may not have
you won't make money with a luxury good, but you will make money with an exotic good. So that's usually the way things work.
Well, let's talk a little bit about watches, because that's another thing that I know you've been doing. Tell us a little bit about the watch market first, and why, how it makes sense in the similar way that you talked about with cars.
So exotic cars that I train people on, the exotic car hacks model, I call it the exotic car hacks formula, is based on a wealth preservation strategy. So it's really not meant to be a moneymaker for people. As you get bigger and you have collections of cars, certainly just like your friends, I make 2 to 3 million a year on my private collection, just switching a few cars there and there and something. But it's not the norm. So I never sell it as such, like it's a money-making kind of program.
Yeah.
It's a wealth preservation strategy. And certainly by saving money, you're able to make more money and not waste it on cars, but enjoy the right cars and still get the experience out of it without the loss. On the watch side, which I teach at Watch Trading Academy, it's a wealth creation strategy. So those are two completely separate things. I tell people, if you're playing in the world of watches, you're there to play to make money. And we have many students who after 2 years are making over $1 million in a recurring 12 months in net profit, which is, it's you would say in most programs, that's the exception. There's a guy doing it and no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
We graduate a new person every single week for the last 3 years into some insane stat like 500K in net profit a year or 1 million, which is insanity if you think about it. Like to think that this is the success rate of a program today. And so people ask me, why watches? What makes them so special? So watches are the only status signaling symbol for men, because we don't wear jewelry that much generically, and cars, certainly you can't take them in a meeting with you. So you can't really take your car to a board meeting and be like, well, I drive a Bugatti. So usually the way it works is men are driven by status. And that's what kind of started the craze of expensive watches and wearing something that tells the time, like it's like art on your wrist. In 2020, which I've been teaching watches since 2007, but in 2020, something really crazy happened. And I kind of predicted this, which I was probably one of the only voices in 2019 when they were starting to talk about this idea of a pandemic coming from overseas, where I started telling people, if the pandemic comes to the US, you need to stack up on assets like cars and watches. And people told me I was cuckoo. They were like, the world's going to shit. Why would people buy watches and cars? Everybody's going to be stocking for weapons. I was like, that's not how this works anymore. But here's what happened. In 2020, watches went mainstream. And they went mainstream for really one key reason. A lot of business owners, people think it's the stimulus checks. It's not. A lot of business owners invest their personal money in their businesses for inventory, for buildings, for whatever it is. So a lot of business owners are technically wealthy, but they're cash poor. So they can't buy luxuries because they're reinvesting their money. So what happened during this pandemic was that a lot of loans went out to business owners and took away the qualifiers they needed to usually get these loans. So they were able to free their personal money, which would have usually been spent on luxuries, and literally were able to use government money to fund their businesses. So when you do that and you have an influx of 400 or 500 grand all of a sudden, like in your business, you go, wait a minute. Now, it's not that I need to cheat this. I just need to take my money out and go have fun with my personal money now. And you're stuck and you can't travel. So where do you go spend money? Cars and watches. So a lot of people ended up buying a lot of cars. And the supply chain, because cars weren't coming in the country and the huge demand, suddenly make car dealers and watch dealers make a ton of money. But something happened that day that I told people wouldn't be reversed. And it was that once you taste money, it's very unlikely that you go back and go, I'm satisfied with a Kia or wearing my Seiko on my wrist now, knowing that I had a 100K Rolex. I go, this is a contagious addiction to status that is going to keep going, because you got a lot of people that don't know what they're doing, buying a lot of expensive things, and they're going to like what it feels like, and they're going to want to keep it up. So what happened was exactly that. In 2020, watches went mainstream, and the ability and the demand exceeded supply so much that prices shot up. Prior to that, I've always told people one of the reasons that watches are so expensive and work so well is because the margins of upwards of 70%, 70 cents on the dollar per unit. Sometimes it could be as easily as arbitrating, like I bought a watch and I sold it for a margin of 20, 30 cents instantly. Sometimes you're getting rare watches that have 50, 70 cents on the dollar, which is very heavy. And the liquidity of watches and the speed, unlike real estate or car flipping or anything else, is that there's no paperwork trail. So it's not like there's a title to a watch similar to that where the government's going to get involved. And it becomes a very easy state of business with a very high demand product that's continuously gaining more demand, and resources and units are becoming more scarce. So it's a recipe for a very good business that allows an asset that's increasing in value, scarce in supply, and that's continuously increasing in demand because more and more people are getting richer historically every single year for the last 20 years. So more people are participating, less units are on the market, and therefore more opportunities exist. This is why whenever people come into my community and say, hey, isn't this getting saturated if you're teaching like 25,000 people so far? Are they going to be like able to like buy watches? And I'm like, no, they actually more money because there's more watches in circulation. They're trading significantly more volume. So it's going to keep going up, and it has been going up nonstop. The speed of transaction and the liquidity of transaction is 3 days. So imagine if you could flip a property in 3 days with no paper trail, with no downside, and with a 20% margin. How many real estate wholesalers would jump ship? Well, that is one of the key reasons we attract more real estate wholesalers to watch flipping than anything else, because they understand liquidity, they understand speed, and they hate how that doesn't work with real estate. But the better part of it is the reason people invest in real estate is because historically, they believe that it can never be worth less. Even if it has periods where it loses value, it's always going to be worth more historically. But if we look at the dynamics of why, it's because of supply and demand. There's always a shortage of homes And there's always going to be a shortage of homes in the key areas, like they're places people want to live. They don't want to live in Idaho. They want to live in Miami and LA, and these places are always going to be the hottest places. So there's always going to be a price increase. That's exactly how the watch market works. So always scarcity, always more demand. So price is only going to go up, and it's your downside is always protected, assuming you know how to buy a watch.
So the watch cycle it can be a little volatile, right? I mean, because I remember last time crypto went way up, like all the crypto bros were buying watches, and the prices kind of went up pretty high too. Maybe that's, but then there was a
You're
crash.
talking about during the pandemic when prices soared to like 300%.
Yeah.
So, but let's take a moment here because there's a lot of confusion in the mass market about that. That had nothing to do with the pandemic, and that has to do with something cyclically that has happened in the watch business. It's called dealer manipulation. Dealers across the world saw there was a scarcity of supply and saw there was a significant increase in demand. And so they didn't like help this by, making sure they made their margin and moved on. What they did is they removed all their inventory offline to make it seem like it was an even bigger shortage, and then started bringing back inventory one at a time, causing prices to explode like 200 to 300%. This was never, especially in our community where we teach our students, we taught them to take advantage of this, but we warned them that these were dangerous manipulation techniques. So they needed to move through inventory very quickly to ensure they weren't holding out the bag, like being the last guy to hold the watch and being like, it's so high. But that is not a normal cycle for watches. That is a manipulated cycle, no different than someone owning every property in your neighborhood that comes up, like a private equity firm saying, I'm going to buy everything and then raise prices. And now I'm the only one holding inventory. You have no choice, right? So that's basically what happened back then. But it's not as volatile as you think. Historically, it's always gone up 10 to 15% year over year.
In the way you teach it and with your most successful students, like, is this kind of what you were alluding to, where, you basically flip within, days to weeks, or,
of course, yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a hold this for a year, like
yes,
the car
that
thing.
Too. So we have both, even with the cars or the watches. The watches are wealth creation. So speed matters. You can certainly create income out of it. But it doesn't mean people can't play in the world of watches through the lens of actually holding an asset and allowing it to go up. This watch used to be 190 grand. Now it's 230 grand 2 years later. Someone who would have bought this 2 years ago would have made $40,000, which is decent. It's like a little bit over 10%, like 10, 15%. It's not bad. There's no transaction fee. There's no middleman. So it's like a net 15. It's good, but this is just a portion of the strategy because you have to actually learn how to buy and sell it too. So otherwise, if you use the middleman like a dealer, you're not going to get the most of the money. Like even when you trade in a car, if you're lazy and don't want to sell your own car, or don't believe you can because you think someone told you no one buys cars from people, which is untrue, then you typically go, I'm just going to trade in my car, and you take a lower value and you see the dealer made 100 grand on your car on the back end. And you're like, what the hell? Like, why'd you make? It's like, well, because I did what you weren't willing to do. I know how to sell things and you don't. So we teach our students how to use both strategies to successfully grow a portfolio and let the strategy fuel itself, as well as make investments in the long term if that's what they want to be at.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious a little bit on, you kind of mentioned, not using a middleman. So in some of these situations, are you just, how do you, like in transactions with, obviously I have a pretty good sense that you could just put a car out there, on a site and, for sale by owner. But what do you do in the watch space? Are you having people like build their own websites, or like generally speaking?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of platforms where you can buy and sell watches. There's a platform named grailsy.com. There's a platform like ebay.com. You can actually do that. Chrono24.com. These are all platforms where people sell watches, private or dealer based. The key to this is also not just say, I buy any watch, I buy any car, I sell any car. People are not car dealers and they're not watch dealers, meaning we're not trying to create people to compete with their local jewelry store and house 15, Rolex or Mariners and try to sell them and make $500 a pop. We teach people to strategically pick watches that enable them to have high margin, low volume. So when they're trading from home, when they're buying a car, we don't expect them to act like a dealer. They don't have a dealer's license. So we're not telling them get a dealer's license, save some money on insurance. We're teaching car people how to be collectors or owners and ultimately turn around and break even or make a profit on a car. And we're teaching watch people how to behave like a dealer with lower and less inventory. And in many cases, buying the right watches that make them the right margin. If you're a dealer, you're buying any watch as long as the price is right. If you're a trader, you have limited capital. People that start with us often start with less than $1,000, access to a post office, and access to a computer. Like, how simple is that, right? Like, you would say, well, probably everyone in your audience can play. The argument is not everyone in the audience will win because people will chase their own version of this, or they'll go look for the Rolex they've always wanted. They'll make an excuse to buy it. Reality is our program is specifically designed to help people scale up in this world with backed by my 20 years of doing this and continuing to do this. So I'm constantly looking at what's happening and putting new content out for my members for free once they've actually joined the academy to help them navigate any changes in the industry, any changes to stay ahead of what jewelers are doing. But there's always a reality that the people trading at home don't have as much capital as jewelers and dealers. So they have to be more strategic about their approach and not just mass buying everything. Think about when Zillow was buying every home in every neighborhood. That didn't work out so well for them, right? Like they're just like, why did I buy all these homes and they're overpriced? But what about a strategic wholesaler, a strategic retailer? They were smart about which homes they were buying, why they were buying them. This is the same exact thing in the watch business.
So, PJ, in your program, I would think that a big part of it is, teaching people about what to buy and what not to buy, because I mean, not a lot of people know much about watches, and they might be hearing this and going, "That sounds like something interesting," but all I know is I've heard that a Rolex or a something like that is a nice watch. I wouldn't know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is this?
And most of our students didn't know that either when they started. They also understood what a Rolex was. They weren't like dumb where they knew what that was, but they didn't know the different models, etc. I mean, we have lists of watches you buy at the beginning to make you comfortable and get through the process, but these things become an addiction once you participate. A lot of times I always say when people have opinions of things they don't participate in, well, those are useless opinions because they're not part of it, right? Like it's like anything. If I have suddenly a big opinion about the yacht lifestyle or the cost of maintenance on yachts, and I'm not personally, I've not owned 20 different yachts in my life, then I may not have an opinion about something that I don't understand as well as a yacht owner who's had multiple yachts over, the last 10 years and has contacts and understands the real cost of things versus the commercialized cost of things. Well, it's the same thing in every industry. Like you have to get your feet wet somewhere. You have to get started. Once you participate in the trade, it's much, much easier once you're participating to start seeing which brands you like, which ones feel good to you, which ones you want to learn more about. But the math doesn't change. So the beauty of this is once you understand the math, you can duplicate it regardless of how much knowledge you have about the watch. And since the watches sell themselves, they're not really reliant on someone's sales experience or capacity to showcase their watch. Buyers are buying their wants. They're not buying their needs. And often buyers actually know more about their watch than I even know about it. Because to me, it's just $1 in, $1 out. But to that buyer, it's like, it's their addiction. They're like, I know everything about this. This is the material he was made. This is the horology. This was the year it was built. And I'm like, I don't even care. Like it's like cars when there's guys that are coming to me and saying, oh, how many horsepower is in this? I don't know. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't what I mean.
It just looks cool, and I know the numbers.
It's cool. It's really fast, and I know exactly the $1 in and the $1 out, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. In terms of setting something up, I would think that, like, because of the tax elements of trading something like this, that you're probably kind of showing people how to, set up LLCs and making it a business. If you're basically just paying regular, right?
After you do a couple of watches a month to get your feet wet and you know that this is for you, we have a full comprehensive program. It breaks everything from, how to set up your LLC, how to file your taxes properly, how to make sure you maximize your deductions for this kind of business, things you need to set up ahead. So we cover all of that. I mean, we're the only place that's been teaching this for 20 years. And I want to say over probably 70% of people on the internet that sell watches today have some way or another touched their academy, either as a student or as a participant, as a teacher or some sort.
Interesting. Well, actually, is there anything other than cars and watches that we haven't talked about that you
Of
want
course,
to
we
mention?
teach handbags as well. We teach luxury travel, anything around the expenditures that people think of having out there. Like they're spending their hard-earned money on something. We teach them how to take that hard-earned money and convert it into an actual investment in themselves rather than losing their money, and doing that. They can do that with travel. Many people know this idea of collecting points, obviously. There's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
new about this, but there are very interesting behind the scenes strategies to spending these points that allow you to get 10 times more for your money, like for the points you're spending and without having to spend it. So you can certainly go way further with the same points. So these are just strategies where, again, wealth preservation, you have 2 million points. You could go on one trip by going to your Amex portal and buying something, or you can do it correctly and go on 5 trips.
Yeah. For people who are really interested, one of the questions they may have is, okay, you had a guy making $1 million a year doing this. Is he doing this full time, or is this
No, part-time. He was one of our top students. Used to be actually a real estate wholesaler. As I told you earlier, they love this transition for them, but because they have to put out so much money, lending leverage and everything, only to wait 2 years to get paid basically on projects and stuff, or they're transacting in like 30, 40, 60 days if it's wholesale. And unfortunately, like there's a lot of that goes to capital gains tax or it becomes income, etc. But with watches, it doesn't work that way. So the beauty of that is even if you're doing it at first part-time, maybe let's say by year 2, you're making $100K a year. This is part-time. Like at the beginning, it might take you like 3 to 5 hours a week to study up and try to get up with the program. But over time, it's like a couple of text messages a day and you're making like 5, 10, 15 grand. Sometimes some of my students tell me they made so much money doing a couple of trades that it feels criminal to them because they're like, I don't understand like how I'm able to make 5 to 10 grand with just 2 text messages. And somehow that's like the way it is. And I'm like, that's how the addiction starts for people. Once they're addicted to to this game, it becomes a very fun game because they have a lot of freedom. They can do it from anywhere they want. I've traded watches from the middle of an airplane on a flight, where my clients text me and I'm like, hey, let me get you this. And then I have an assistant that can literally ship it the next day. So it's a very easy and calming type of business that's not intense in the way like people want you to work 80, 90 hours a week to hustle your way through it. It's more about understanding it. Once you have the math and it starts mathing in your head, everything kind of works its way out,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Super cool, man. Where do people go to learn about this stuff?
Oh, super easy. Learn from pj.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being on the show again.
No, my pleasure. And I'm always available to answer questions anytime you guys want, okay?
Great.
You make a lot of money but are still worried about retirement. Maybe you didn't start earning until your 30s, and now you're trying to catch up. Meanwhile, you've got a mortgage, private school to pay for, and you feel like you're getting further and further behind. Now, good news, if you need to catch up on retirement, check out a program put out by some of the oldest and most prestigious life insurance companies in the world. It's called Wealth Accelerator, and it can help you amplify your returns quickly, protect your money from creditors, and provide financial protection to your family if something happens to you. The concepts here are used by some of the wealthiest families in the world, and there's no reason why they can't be used by you. Check it out for yourself by going to wealthformulabanking.com.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, just a different way to look at personal finance, look at, luxury and stuff like that. It's not that, all luxury is a waste of money. Sometimes buying fancy stuff, nice stuff can actually be a good investment. Try to think about that next time you're going to buy something, because frankly, if you're buying furniture from IKEA, it's guaranteed to go to zero. Not everybody can afford the super expensive stuff, but some of you can, I know. And start thinking about what might hold its value, and maybe don't think about buying new. That's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off. If you want to learn more, you can now get free access to our in-depth personal finance course featuring industry leaders like Tom Wheelwright and Ken McElroy. Visit wealthformularoadmap.com.